Do my
Just so you know, we're rolling right now. So welcome everybody. You go ahead and change whatever you need to change because sorry we had already done it, but it should be
okay.
okay, right?
I just want to put my email up here so
Oh
that
yeah, yeah, perfect.
do my
Just so you know, we're rolling right now. Oh, sorry. Oh gosh, I'm rusty today. Welcome everyone. I am here with Cheryl Hope. I'm thankful that you are here. I
for
want
having me.
Yeah, I wanted to share really quickly just some background business for my channel. I want to tell everybody because I know that I have publicly said that I'm not going to have any more survivors on. Cheryl can attest. I talked to her. I've known about her story. I had told her probably 4 to 6 months ago that you could come on. And it's just the first time that it's actually been able to work out. So I'm keeping my promise. I also want you to know that you can come back again so that you can, feel like you get the whole story out because your story has a huge scope. And one of the things I was ticking off all the abuse because one of the things I think kind, loving people that come out of religious abuse is a lot of it hasn't been defined as abuse. And so
Mhm.
I'm going to name all of these. This is how we're going to begin. And you can
I
just
love
let me
it.
know if any of these are wrong, okay? So there was kind of sexual abuse going on.
Oh, very much so. Yes.
Okay, there was financial abuse
Hmm.
going on. There was medical abuse going on. There was bullying
Yeah.
going on. There was religious abuse.
Yes.
There was gender abuse.
Yeah.
There was generational abuse.
100%. Yes.
There was family
Yeah.
abuse, both within the family and to the family from the church.
Yeah.
Then there was a sort of bizarre drug abuse, right?
Yeah.
There was both injecting things and also carrying things
Yeah.
like mule type
Yeah.
abuse. And then animal abuse. All
Mm.
of some of the above, and it doesn't necessarily have to be you, but maybe
Yeah.
the Plymouth
Yes.
Brother.
Yes, there was. Yeah. 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 And yeah, we'll unravel that story of the animal stuff at another time. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good.
But
All
very
right.
much so. Yeah.
So think about as a child growing up with parents who have been stripped of all their humanity. And now you, as a child, are making decisions that your parents couldn't make. So let's start with real basics and let's start with what is the Plymouth Brethren? If you could share, because I do know that we have some stuff in the United States, but it is kind of a bigger deal in Canada, right?
Well, actually, so it is global. So it's the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church, was previously known as the Exclusive Brethren, and they had their charity status suspended for a couple of years in the UK. And in that time, they had to do this big review, and in order to get their charity status back, they had this huge list that they had to follow, and they rebranded themselves as the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. So when I was a part of it, we were known as the Exclusive Brethren, and then they rebranded themselves as the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. It is worldwide. There's 55,000 members. Canada, it's just as much people in Canada as there is in the States. In the UK and overseas, New Zealand, Australia, there's a lot over there. And the head leader lives in Australia. When I left, the leader that was in place then was John Hales, and he passed away, and his son Bruce Hales took over, who lives in Australia. They both lived in Australia. And when Bruce Hales took over, he really transformed and radicalized the whole operation, and it's become this huge business corporation that is still fronting itself as this mainstream Christian church, which is the furthest thing from a mainstream Christian church. It's a very, very, very strong cultic group. Very strong cultic group. A lot of people refer to it as Scientology, very along the same lines as Scientology.
Or Hotel California, you can check in, but you can never leave.
100%, exactly. And they base their whole theology around the scripture of 2 Timothy 2, of withdrawing from inequity. And it talks about, actually I had it pulled up. But their version from JND, they rewrote that verse from the King James Version. And even since the Jan Darby version, Mr. Bruce Hales has now changed it even more. So it goes into this separation, that they separate themselves from the world. So the people of the world are called the worldlies, the worldly people, and they separate themselves from the evil of the world. And when you're born into this institution, you are considered very prized, like one of God's prized, cherished people to do this work on the earth. And if you leave that, that is huge. Like, that's most of my visits that I got, priestly visits, we call them, was over that, was like, you realize what you're doing to the position that was gifted to you. But under that umbrella is they believe that they're separating themselves from the evil, but they don't realize the evil that exists inside it. And so I have to say, it was over 10 years ago when I first really kind of came out with what had happened to me with my parents one time on a phone call. So my relationship with my parents has been on and off since I left in 1992. And I had kind of taken this stab of this list that I wanted to talk to them about, that what happens out here in the world is the exact same thing that happens inside there. And it got into a very heated discussion. And I literally came right out and said, Ellen Drever raped me. And I kept it I did. It was, and I hadn't really planned on saying it. I think I just got so heated that my chest could no longer keep that secret inside me. And both my parents were on the phone call with one of my brothers. There could have been two brothers, but I know for sure one of my brothers was on there. And it was just kind of this dead silence. And all my mom said was, well, did he touch you? And it wasn't this compassionate thing of like, oh, Cheryl, what happened? Like, what did you go through?
My dear,
right?
God, yes.
Right. Is this why you left? Is this like, talk to us more about it. It was this kind of strict landing pad that I was given. So I retreated, pulled back, and I was like, there's no way I can do this. I remember getting off that phone call. I remember throwing my house phone across the room, and I was thinking, okay, you know what? I got to stuff this monkey back into its cage. And so back it goes again. And I guess it's more or less been watching for a landing pad. It really flared for me this January and February. And at the same time, a documentary had come out on, it was called Veracity, Breaking Brethren on City TV.
Okay.
And so it got me thinking like, okay, this is Canada. This kind of stuff happens all the time overseas. Never has Canada had an explosion. Like Canada's never been exposed for what has gone on in Canada, and especially the town that I was raised in, which was Maple Creek, Saskatchewan. So in Maple Creek, Saskatchewan, in a span of, I don't know how many years, there was like 19 teens that were either kicked out, forced out, thrown out, or left. It was unheard of in any other locality. Maple Creek's a very small town. It was a small kind of division of the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. So
is it similar to like a whistleblower, like in the United States, where like the entire mainstream media goes after them? Do they try and ruin your reputation, or do they kind of just let you go?
So for myself, I was very much forced out, but it was because there was a trio of priests that overthrew the main leader of Maple Creek. He was an older gentleman. And these three priests, one of them that actually came to my perpetrator's house one time when he had really hurt me. And my perpetrator's, Ellen Drever's wife, was this man, his name's Morse Hope's sister, like they were brothers and sisters. And he became this trio that collected these three priests, and they kind of overthrew Maple Creek. And they started really forcing me out. As soon as I got a paper out just before I turned 12, and things started heating up as soon as I kind of was developing. I was becoming vocal. I was becoming interested in boys. And all of a sudden, I had just all this stuff just come on top of me of being caught talking to somebody who I shouldn't be talking about that was outside of the brethren, being caught with a skirt that was too short, being caught with doing something in school that I shouldn't have been doing. So it was all these little tiny things that I was being set up. His kids would tattle on me. And before you know it, I started having all these priestly visits. So by the time I had hit 16, I had the priestly visits got very, very, very intense for our family. And we had this one specific priestly visit that they came prior to church, prior to meeting. And they sat down with our whole family, and we're having this priestly visit over special friendships. So in the church, you're not allowed to have special friendships. So if you hang out with somebody too much and they notice that you're becoming friends with somebody, that is called a special friendship, and you're not allowed to have them. Our house growing up was a block away from the high school, and my mom, she loved baking. Everybody came there for the chocolate chip cookies. It was kind of a very much teen hangout place. And this one priestly visit we got was for special friendships, that there was reports of these special friendships and the wickedness that was happening inside our house. And my mom, it got very heated, and my mom stood up and challenged them.
Wow.
And because of that, we were instantly shut up. And the word shut up is your first term of excommunication. So there's two layers. You get shut up and then withdrawn from. And so we were immediately shut up, and they just hounded my father for not being the head of the household, not having control over his wife, not being able to have this situation under control. And how dare my mom even have the thought in her mind to be able to stand up and challenge them. And we kind of all broke at that moment. It was a very scary thing to be shut up, because in there, it's the worst thing that could happen to you. And
well, because you're so special and lucky to be there.
Mm-hmm. So to have a whole family shut up was just like, whoo. So we were all crying. And this priestly visit went on for a lengthy time. And then all of a sudden it was like, we repented enough, and then we could be unshut up and we could go to meeting.
Nice.
So we walked into church half hour late with 4 priests and our family, completely, looking back on it, intimidation. I was mortified. I was so mortified. I was like, I've got to go to school tomorrow. I've got to face all these people. And we sat there. I remember just sitting there, my head down the entire meeting, being like, just nobody look at me. Nobody look at me. Because it was an intimidation factor completely, right? It was that night during meeting, I was like, I'm done. I am done. Up until this point, I had really stayed for my dad. My dad had a really bad accident when I was 2.5. And his personality side of his brain had kind of been damaged. And so he was very naive, kind of gullible. He just said whatever he wanted to say. And he got made fun of a lot. And so I had just, in my heart was like, I got to protect my dad. I just got to make sure I got to protect my dad. And I had decided that I'm going home. To me, it wasn't even suicide. It was just like, I'm going home. I am not going to torture myself like this anymore.
I didn't realize that's what you meant by going. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I'm going home. I'm like going home to the place where I know I'm accepted.
How old were you?
16.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So that next morning, the older gentleman that's supposed to be taking the lead showed up on our doorstep before I went to school in tears. And he said, there's nothing more that I can do. My hands are tied. And so I had left behind a suicide poem that day on my paper route. And my mom had found it and talked to me about it. And I froze. It was probably, in therapy, this is what I deal with. I deal with this moment in time where I froze, because I hadn't planned at that moment to leave what would that look like? I had when I was 13, 14, I kind of, you watch the outside world and what it would be like to be able to, go and do things and to be free like that. But I hadn't really thought of like, what would it be like if I actually got the courage up to leave? So I had to renegotiate everything and be like, okay, well, I can't go home. Like, what am I going to do? And so I had I had another girl in the church that I had noticed was struggling, was actually the priest's granddaughter. And we got to become friends and we ended up leaving together. But out of this whole thing, when things kind of exploded again for me in January and February, and I really sat down with everything that had gone on, I had realized from the time I was 2 that I was programmed that everything I did, I was doing for my dad. So my perpetrator, Ellen, that was one of the things that he used to tell me all the time, was that you're helping your dad out. You're helping your dad out. That's
so evil.
I was trafficked, like sex trafficked to lots of other places. And the lady driver of the car, you're so brave. You realize you're helping your dad. You realize you're helping your dad. And not until you actually sit down and you put this on paper, do I realize why I was so freaking attached to staying in there for my dad.
Yeah. Yeah, not to mention the natural innate instinct, it's strong. God made us really, really powerfully, fearfully and powerfully made. But when it is used incorrectly, it is so damaging. So we're going to add friendship abuse and groomer abuse. The list is getting longer as we speak. So now you've got this voice. You've had years and years of therapy.
30 years.
So you've earned this platform, girl. And so talk to us a little more, because there's a lot of people that don't understand that these priestly visits weren't just about correcting your family. They're also
no, there was
nasty,
no correction.
and they're more about really professionally shaming somebody.
Yeah, they never came to you with solutions. Never was there solutions. Never was there compassion. Never was there like, what can we do to help your family? It was all, this is what you're doing wrong. The devil's living in here. Here's the wickedness here. And you're abandoning your place within the assembly. And it was just this constant, they would take my dad. He'd be gone for hours. He'd come back and he would just sit in his corner of his living room and wouldn't speak for weeks. Just these little things here and there. One time he came back and he's like, Barb, I've got to find the phone bills. They want the phone bills. And that was kind of one of the things that I had gone up.
You also want to see for your calling?
I guess so. And I mean, when you understand the whole umbrella of my story, I now understand why they wanted the phone bills. Because what happened to me, I know now both my parents knew.
Right. I'm so
sorry. 100%. They knew. I also know that with the complexity of it, I mean, the amount of stuff of people have come forward that have, it was very overwhelming. I had to seek out new therapy. I had to find different ways to kind of, because it's a different element of grief when you know that they knew, and yet my mom's mother bear instinct was not strong enough to know that she needed to get me to safety, or to at least go to the police.
Right. Well, that's what I was saying earlier about the things slowly being stripped. And from what I understand about Plymouth Brethren, you're born into this religion.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And so when your mom was a little one and when your dad was a little one, they also were trained with whatever programming they had for them. And so that's what makes it even more complex, because as an adult, you know that they weren't capable because their humanity was stripped.
Yeah.
But what's so cool is yours was too, and you still overcame it. So what do you think is the difference between you and your parents, as far as what is it, something inside of you? Is it?
I think it's your fire of your soul, the fire of your spirit. the fire that just exists in you that doesn't allow yourself to be, I just couldn't be owned. I think I also went through so much trauma. When you hit a death, like when you go to take your own life, there's something magical that happens in there. And I know this sounds like a dichotomy. This sounds very warped, but it's truth that in your death, you claim yourself. And so I've suffered from suicide quite a lot through my life. And every time that I hit that door, I pick up another part of my fire. So I don't know. My mom actually was 14 when she was brought into it. And so like my dad was born into it. My mom was 14 though. And I think that actually hurt me worse because I know that she knew of what this outside world was and that it wasn't as bad as what everybody said it was.
Yes. Would it be fair to say that your mom could have been more fearful?
100%. I think the biggest, so I'm in the therapy I'm in right now is dealing with my mom.
Yeah.
It's very heavy. It's very intense. It's heavy only because I hold her accountable more than what my dad was. I mean, I still went through my dad's stuff and held him accountable where I could hold him accountable, but where I can hold my accountable has so much more roots,
right,
that it's hard for me to come to terms as myself as a mother of 3 children that right. And but there's things that go through my mind and things that I've heard. I was born on Halloween. I heard that my mom tried to have me very hard, was told to have me on the 30th, not to have me on the 31st. I don't know if there's truth to that, but it makes sense to me. I've heard rumors. There's other people who were like, oh yeah, well, we knew about that. That was just a common thing. We knew that you know, that there was this evil within you because you were born on Halloween.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that was a scar against me. Plus I also was 13 months after there's only 13 months between me and my sister. So there's part of you that when you allow that grief to get away on you, that grief says you weren't important enough. That grief says, well, you came in on the wrong day. That grief says there's all these things stack up against you. So it was easy for you for them to let you go.
Yes.
And I think for me, it's about reclaiming my own importance that is separate from what I believe my parents' importance to me is. Yes. And that's something that you can't do until you get to the age I am, right? Like that is something, it's a maturity that has to happen within you. I've had to weed through anger, resentment, bitterness, all those things that I was very focused on taking the church down. Now that I've worked through that, especially the resentment and bitterness, those are 2 things that you have to really, really, really work through and learn how to make it a fuel now to create change, because change has to happen. Since I came out with my story on James D. Fiore's podcast, Blackballed, the amount of stories, Carmen, that have fallen onto my lap would make anybody find a corner in a fetal position.
Yeah.
And I carry it, right? But I use it as fuel. At first, it was a huge responsibility. It was really breaking me. Right. And I had to find this way through therapy of like, no, Cheryl, you got to transform that and use this as fuel to create this movement that you're trying to create. I can tell you
to trust God, because God is inside each one of those people, and it's how willing they are to allow God to work the way you have.
Mm-hmm. And for them, so what the biggest thing within that in the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church is you don't ask the question ever, what would Jesus do? It's what would Bruce Hales do? Wow. They don't even it's reading the Bible isn't one of those things that's really pushed. Instead, it's read the ministry. And the ministry is the recorded versions of all Bruce Hales meetings that are put in these books. And that is what is pushed on you. So
Wow.
they've completely lost the essence of Christianity inside there, but they have all these faces on the outside that they had to put on in order to regain their charity status.
Yeah.
So they've got this rapid relief team that is this charity that goes out in floods and fires and all these emergency situations, and they hand food out to. And it's such a facade, because here they have broken up hundreds and hundreds of families and marriages, thrown people out on the street homeless, yet they focus on their image versus focusing on what can we do to help the souls of these young ones that are now adults, the young ones that are leaving. It's just, there's no compassion. There's just no compassion.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. It's interesting too, because I had never heard of it. Cheryl and I have a friend who introduced us, and when she told me about it, I started researching. And I'll let Cheryl tell you who one of the famous Plymouth Brethren is. And I think if you really put things, people are horrible sometimes at putting dots together. Maria Farmer and I talk about this often, because she's just like, why don't people get this, you know? And
Mhm.
she and I were laughing the other day because we were talking about how in America they're trying to get people to pay for colleges with their tax money, right? The government's going to pay. And to Maria and I, it was so obvious, like, okay, well, that means that they're not valuable, because if they were valuable, people would be able to take it to market and make money. So we've got a disconnect here. But I mean, people aren't putting the two and two together. So to me, this was a huge piece to the puzzle. Like as soon as I saw this,
I just found this out today, and I was just like, I mean, there's parts of my story I haven't talked about that I
oh,
want
see,
to
I
get
didn't know
done.
that you didn't know that.
I had no clue.
Oh, I knew
I
that.
I literally just got the text, and I was on this global movement Zoom call when it came through, and so I asked them, and they confirmed it. So Aleister Crowley was an ex-PBC member, and it's just like I was just mind blown. So I'm still processing it.
So his father had to be in it.
Yeah. So
For him to be in
yeah.
it. And his father was a really, really wealthy man, and Aleister Crowley inherited so much money, but then crazily died poor and in obscurity in this like crazy English room house, which I'm really kind of happy about, quite frankly.
Yeah. Right. Like sometimes those, karma comes around. Yeah, I was mind blown. I have to digest it. There was some other things on the call that I had today, of this other man. I cannot pronounce his name properly. I think it's called,
Is it the one you sent me, the Massimo?
yeah, intervene. Yeah. So he helps with the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church court cases, and he's got a book out on Satanism. So I was just like, there's just so much information since I've come out that it's every day something comes. I had someone message me that Bruce Hales, his latest thing is like, it's not that we haven't loved enough, it's that we haven't hated enough. And I'm like, these are the teachings he's giving. Like, right. And you call yourself a mainstream Christian church.
Well, it's wild too, because just rewinding, thinking about what you said, they actually take his meetings. And when you say meeting, do you mean worship service?
Yes, worship service.
So his speech on the podium, whatever. And so they take those, they transcribe them, and they bound them, and they tell you to read them on a regular.
And you have to pay for them. So these are things that you are not allowed not to pay for. You have to pay for these. So they're billionaires in there, right? Bruce Hales and his family are absolute multi-billionaires, and he's very smart with how he did this. They have, so their phones and their laptops are all made from inside the PBCC. They have to have this app on there called Streamline 2 or Streamline 3 or something like that. Their laptops, I think, are like $25 a month. Their phones are $50 a month. Plus then there's a Brethren Rogers charge on top of that. They have photo albums.
55,000 members all are told they have.
Yes, yes.
So
So
it's
if you
not just
have a,
the clergy that are using this.
no, this is everybody's cell phone and everybody's laptop come from inside the church, and they're monitored, right? So that's the whole point, is that I think they use Blackberries, I
So
think is
people
what.
are paying for their own mousetrap.
Yes, 100, and they don't see it. They totally don't see it. And then on top of it, they have these photo albums that are from every locality are made, and you buy those. They have their own grocery stores. And someone had sent a text, I think it was on one of our Facebook exclusive brethren Facebook pages, put the screenshot of it. They had been spending, the average was $3 and something per day, and people needed to start spending $10 a day per person at their grocery store so they could meet their quota.
It's yeah, well, somebody knows business and within
And
the,
he's very much a businessman, right?
yeah.
I mean, and
And I think I read about a month ago that they were somehow involved with some of the things that were going on with the I call it the VEX.
yeah, so they won so many PPE contracts, very much so, and that is being exposed.
That's what it was. It was the PPE.
Contracts, yeah, like,
Wow.
and it actually was brought up. I saw an article just the other day. It was actually brought up, and I think it was in the UK, right in Parliament, like in the government. That people are questioning it.
Yeah.
And I think it's about exposure. Like at this point, Canada hasn't really had its exposure. The United States hasn't had its exposure. And I think that that's one of the main things that we're trying to do, is we're trying to get the same kind of exposure they have all the time overseas here.
Right.
Because most people haven't heard of them. And it's like this 55,000 member cult, but very mighty powerful within the political system.
So now I have a question for you, because I know you're a very compassionate person. I've watched several of your videos on Blackballed and on your podcast, and we're going to talk about both of those because I want you to advertise for both of them. But one of the things that was kind of interesting is you're so compassionate towards these people, even your perpetrator. You believe that, jail might not be the best thing. And
Yeah.
so the next question for me, and we can talk about that if you want to, but the real question for me was, what percentage of that 55,000 brethren do you believe have a level of evil?
That's a really good question. That is a really, really good question, because the whole entire Hales family has it. And then you can go to people, if you're researching the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church, you're going to come up against names such as Rod Diplock, Brad Mitchell. So you have these very hierarchy people. When John Hales died, Bruce Hales came along and did this whole revamp, and he got rid of all the old people that were in the lead and put all these young businessmen in the lead. And that's how he's created what he's created. There are good people in there, but the evil people make up for the amount of good people that are in there. And the good people that, like, there's true Christians in there. I would call my parents true Christians, but they are true Christians that are blindfolded.
Yes.
And so they don't see the world that they're in, right down to them, my siblings watching my podcast and questioning it. And I just know that if one of my siblings came to me with the allegations that I came with, I would sob, and I wouldn't even question anybody. It could be somebody I hated. If someone showed up on my doorstep, I would be like, get me the police, get me a therapist, get me this person a warm blanket, and let's find a way to, we have to move through this. The reason why I experienced Ellen Drever's sickness, it keeps me awake at night. And I know from phone calls that I have received that he is still active.
Yeah.
I've let the police know that he is still active. The thing is so many people come to me anonymously, and I treat And when people come to me anonymously, I treat that with the utmost respect because I was in there. I know what it's like they can do to you inside there. And I would never want to inflict harm on someone. If you ever watch any of Richard Marsh's, so he's another ex-member that's very vocal.
Yeah.
He talks about his 5 children that are in there and he doesn't contact them. And people have a hard time wrapping their head around why he doesn't contact them. And the reason is, he says the same thing, is that if he was to contact them, it would create more harm towards them than if he was to stay out here and just try and make an opening for them to come out.
Yeah.
And the same thing for these people that come anonymously with like soul crushing information. And yet I have to remain anonymous. I have to let them remain anonymous because I would never want to inflict that kind of pain on them. And I have to trust that these breadcrumbs that I'm eating keep coming one by one, by one, by one. And all I got to do is stay on that one breadcrumb and know that the next breadcrumb is going to come. Some days it's very overwhelming. And I had this one I can talk about. So I had an anonymous 15-year-old person send me a message from the inside. And
same age you were, or close to it.
Yeah, it was absolutely heart-wrenching. I'm just pulling it up.
Yeah, no worries. No worries.
So it's when I get things like this, I broke this night and it took me quite a while to bounce back. I'll read you the last, can I read you the last paragraph?
Please.
So I'm going to end with the last sentence of the paragraph before. She says, may Bruce Hales and all of his teachings rot in hell. Thank you so much. You will never know how much this has helped me. I really, truly hope that you can get through to the police and get them to stop this. I don't think worldly people grasp how big and awful this whole operation is. My heart absolutely breaks for all the little kids that have to grow up in this church. Please, I beg of you, for my cousins, for your cousins, for my nieces, for your nieces, for my nephews, for your nephews, for my family, for your family, for me, for you, and this. And I got that at night and I had to, I broke because all I could picture was myself choosing to go home.
Yeah.
And I sent this to the police and I said, I don't want a suicide on my hands. And I don't think you do either. And I said, I don't think that this case is getting the urgency that it needs.
Right.
And it needs to have this urgency added on this. And then 3 days later, I get more horrific news of Ellen's doings that's still going on. So I know it was someone saying, Cheryl, don't let up on the gas. Do not let up on the gas. This is what you're fighting for. Don't keep going. Just keep on going. It's just hard some days because I'm also doing my own personal healing alongside trying to use the fuel of that to make sure that we are not missing our mark on anything, making sure that we have our I's dotted, our T's crossed, that we are doing what we can be doing.
Well, and it's interesting because a lot of times, like when I first started, having different people on, people are like, aren't you afraid? There's big people upset with them. And I was listening to this woman today. Her name is, I think it's Tori Mayer. I'm so sorry if I have your name wrong. But she was saying that you can tell the people that are in the fight by the level of their enemy. And I think
that's very good. Yeah.
I think that when you put that in perspective, it's a very, very powerful and profound statement, because if your enemy is somebody on Twitter that, said something you don't like, that's one thing. But when your so-called enemy are the police handling this properly? Are these kids going to be safe? These are much bigger enemies, so to speak. And so it's just more to carry. You have to do more to fortify yourself. I've had Trina Piccarello on, and she always suggests anytime a survivor or comer comes out and tells their story, especially for the first time, that they really prep themselves mentally.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, do you see that the police are helping?
Do you know, it's really hard because it's a very complex case. He reassured me. So he did after my second email back in that week, that the last horrific news that I'd got, I was done. Like I was ready to show up on my lead investigator's doorstep and be like, I'm not leaving until we do something. And so he reassured me that is this case is a top priority, but we're dealing with, so it's not just Ellen Drever we're dealing with. We're dealing with the places that he took me to. We're dealing with a whole other group that I was taken to. We're dealing with the list of the 18 kids. So he is treating this. I don't know. I mean, you're in the States. I don't know if you know, in Saskatchewan, there's this legacy or Christian Legacy Academy Christian school that had a bunch of people came out of all the abuse that happened there. I'm not sure if you're aware of that.
No, I hadn't seen that one.
So Caitlin Erickson was the Cheryl in that one. And I got to there. It's a very complex case over there too. And they're treating this like that. And I actually talked to Caitlin, was it last week? I think it was last week I talked to her. It was right before one of my podcasts with James. And she said to me, she said it was 496 days since she had done her police report and no charges had been made.
Wow.
And so I do not hold my hope on, I don't hold my hope on the police. Not that I don't believe in them. I can't focus my energy on them giving the attention it needs right now when I get the emails and the messages that I get. Right. So for me, it's about being as vocal and as about public as I can be. We're now going to start with hitting up members of parliament, right? Anybody who wants to send messages and emails to, we have to go that way next. We've got to put the pressure on them that way. It's hard to sleep. And I mean, I'm sure many of the survivors have been on your show. It's hard to sleep at night when you've had a therapy session and you're in some really heavy stuff that happened to you. And you know that this perpetrator is still out. And you know how he's luring people into his house now, how you sleep at night, because the activist in you is wanting, I'll go show up his doorstep. Absolutely. I'll take him. I'll bring the straitjacket for him. And he does need help. I just think when we look at society as a whole and the pandemic of this, because it is a pandemic, this is not just people coming out here and there. This is an absolute freaking pandemic.
Yes. From
how many years ago to now? It's a pandemic. And so how do we stop this? That's what I asked myself for years. Like, how do you stop this? Because jail, you go in and you come out. But what happens to you in there? Nobody's looked inside this man's brain.
A lot of them end up worse. A lot of them end up worse.
Right? Ellen's brain needs to be evaluated. He needs to be medicated. I had times when he came into the room that he always did everything in. And one time it's the toolbox and everything he used on the toolbox with me. And the other time he would come in and I would know, whoa, this is the creepy one. This is the time where he doesn't talk to me. He just pulls me to the end of the bed and I'm his playground and he's talking to people. He's sick. Like he is sick.
Yeah. And so I can imagine. I mean, when you said toolbox, I was like horrified. And then you said that you saw a face that was worse than that.
Yeah.
Wow. But there's a thing that comes over people who have that level of evil within them or operating through them. There's a look in their eye that's very
when he came in that when those ways, you can scare the crap out of me because I knew that he wouldn't hear my cries. I knew that anything that happened above my waist, he had no connection to me. I literally was just a playground.
Wow.
And he acted like a child, right? Like,
what is his position in the church?
So he was an elder, but not like in the lead or anything like that. The
Okay.
thing is that his wife was married to Morse Hope, who was the lead, right? Who took over. So he was protected, and he still is protected. So there was another lady that actually was coming forward and kind of got stopped along the process. And one of the reasons why I became vocal is she's not a member of the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church, but she worked in close proximity with Ellen and his son. And I was very picky with who I talked to, who I reached out to, in trying to put these puzzle pieces on how do I do this? How can I manage this? Where's my landing pad? And I had messaged a girl who had left that I really questioned why she had left. And so I asked her, like, were you ever sexually abused? Or do you know anybody who was, in particular with Ellen Drever? And she's like, I wasn't. She says, but holy cow, like, do I have a story for you? Like, I had someone message me like this atrocity that was going on at where I used to work. And like, it was horrible, Cheryl. And so I said, get me in touch with her. So I got in touch with her, and I was like, yeah, I'm done.
This is
And
where networking women are brilliant.
And at that point, Richard Marsh had come out with his story. So Richard Marsh was hunted down by the Brethren. They hired political whistleblower David Wallace to hunt down Richard Marsh, because Richard Marsh had become a whistleblower. Something happened inside there and he was excommunicated. And he was literally hunted down. And Richard Marsh questioned it when they found it, when everything came across. There was like, they just questioned everything that was going on, realized who Richard Marsh was, and then they whistleblown on that, right? When I knew the political stuff came out, when I knew what Richard Marsh was revealing, what David Wallace was revealing, I knew, Cheryl, this is your chance. Like, I had to have a landing pad where my story wasn't going to be washed out. I had to have a landing pad where it was matching up with the atrocities that were already being told. So we had the Breaking Brethren. Then we had this audio of David Wallace calling a colleague of Richard Marsh, being like, who are these people? And like, this man should fear his life. Like, he has the actual e-transfers from the Peebs that were paying him to find Richard Marsh.
Wow.
Like, it's just, I had my time came and I was able to come out.
And are those the people that you're doing your podcast with? Let's take a little segue and take a little lighter moment. Tell us about the name of your podcast, who is hosting it with you, why you started it. Just give everybody the information so that they can find you, because my guess is you're going to be a powerhouse, and I'm going to be looking forward to all of your podcasts.
So it's called Get a Life on YouTube, Ex-Cult Conversations. And there's 4 of us that are in and out of it. Myself, Richard Marsh, and Carmen Drever. So Carmen Drever was married to one of the 3 priests. I'm going to go back up here. Morse Hope, Harry Drever, and Dudley Boyer were the 3 priests that really wreaked havoc on Maple Creek. Carmen married Harry Drever's son, went to John Hales about these 19 kids that have been excommunicated, and was like fiercely like quoting the scripture of like, when one sheep goes missing, that you go and get that sheep and you bring it back. She had quoted that in there, and ended up they wreaked havoc on her and Rick's life, and she ended up they pretty much forced them out, because to them she was spreading,
saving her marriage.
Yes. So her and Rick are out together, and all their kids. She saw how they were treating her with revealing this, when all she wanted was some compassion, and be like, how do we restore these kids? Like, we need to be going after these kids. We need to, like, how come nobody's questioned this? So Carmen is on there. And go ahead.
So it's you, Richard, Carmen,
and Lane Admiral. And so Lane also has
Oh, his
horrific.
story is amazing. I was
Yeah.
listening to
Yeah.
his. He was the one, isn't he the one that like the doctors were like making him take certain things for
Yeah. He's
years?
got a documentary out called The Devil's Trap on
Oh,
CBC, and
God.
incredible. I mean, you also have to understand this was taken back into 2015. I mean, he uses some words in there that were socially acceptable inside the PBCC that aren't socially acceptable out here. So you have to kind of move past some of the words that are used in there. But it captures, that documentary captures what a teenage boy and girl goes through leaving. Yeah, it's good. So
Okay, and
that
it's
we're
called
just,
The Devil's Trap.
it's called The Devil's Trap on CBC. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So our whole point, the reason why we did this is more so was exposure, and we're trying to bring forward ex-members that have never told their story. For me, it's about healing. I want to offer healing. And when you're witnessed by somebody and you're in a space where you know your voice is being heard, it is one of the most healing things that you can do in a situation like this. And because I had experienced it, I want to bring other people on to experience the same thing. And also we're exposing, right? We're really getting through to the world of how evil this cult is.
Well, it's amazing. I actually really love it. I've watched, I think you have three so far,
Yeah,
and
the third one came out yesterday. Yeah.
I've watched all of them already. They were really good. Here, I'm gonna put it in the chat so people have it. So, um, right now, copy link, and then let's get that. And then go ahead and share where you first told your story, and a little bit about that channel because you really like that gentleman, right? I mean, you
Yeah,
got
he was very compassionate. The thing is it was, I had reporters, we had people reach out to us, but it's very scary for somebody to go up against the system that we're going up against. I know it's only 55,000 people in there, but they make their bark very loud. And so we were very appreciative of James D. Fiore to really bite the bullet on this.
yeah.
And, you know, regardless of faith, regardless of where any political stature, this is where that stuff just washes away, and it's literally human to human sharing experiences. And James was very much able to offer that platform
Awesome.
and really allow, my story to be told. I did his first podcast after it was like 4 hours of doing a police statement that I did that first podcast.
You must have been so exhausted that night.
I was exhausted, but I understand the whole reasoning why the universe did it that way is because it allowed me I just came from here. There was none of this. It
Right.
was,
You were
it was
excited. You were
raw and vulnerable.
yeah, no, and it's a really good one, and it's got over 7,000 views or something. And his channel is kind of new. I think he's big in Canada and has his own podcast, but
Blackballed.
it's kind of new on YouTube, I guess. But both really good resources to find out more about Cheryl, about the Plymouth Brethren. So we've already gone to an hour. What are some things that you would like to close with? You wanted to make sure that you got across ways for people to find you. Any closing comments?
I think for me, it's about raising this awareness about the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church, formerly known as the Exclusive Brethren. And I am looking for help. Carmen lives in the States. I know she is looking for help. We're looking for help on how to put the pressure on a little bit to have change happen. I don't plan on, my goal is not to take apart this church. It's not. I want to restore it to a Plymouth Brethren Christian church, to a mainstream church that I know that my parents can pass away in peacefully, knowing what Christianity should be.
Yeah.
So it's about exposure. I am always open to people emailing me and saying, hey, have you guys gone this avenue? Or, hey, have you done this? Or I have this contact and you have that contact. It's about networking. So I think one of the biggest things is I always am open for networking. from wherever.
Right. Well,
That's my,
good. Go ahead.
I should say that's my biggest plea is right now is finding ways to network this and expose it. So the thing is exposure, is sharing the stuff, getting in and really understanding what's happening, because these people are in your backyard.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So what about backlash? Before you go, what has there been backlash? The perpetrator obviously knows you're telling people, right?
Oh yeah. So I didn't leave after I finished my police interview, I was left very protected. They didn't let me leave without the protection that I had. So I'm very protected.
Oh, I'm glad.
And my house has cameras all around it. So I'm very protected in that sense. What was the question again?
Oh no, I was just asking about backlash.
Backlash. So yes, when Carmen came forward, so Carmen's lineage, her grandpa was actually the world leader for quite a lengthy time. So when Carmen came on board with us, and when she came forward with her story on James DeFiore's podcast, she had a disconnection of service the next day. Nothing had ever happened in 18 years. And I woke up, my computer had been wiped clean.
Oh, but you're not on their system, are you?
No, but so here's the thing:
So
when you really dive, they know how to do things. So when you dive into some of the conversations with Richard Marsh, and so Brad Mitchell has contacts within every cell phone carrier. Like they 100% know how to knock things down. Yeah.
Wow, it's like a little nation inside of the world,
Very much so. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they've really done a good job building it. And it's
So there is
crazy.
backlash.
It's really old, right? Isn't it from like the 1600s or
I
something?
think it's 1800s, and I don't remember which church they broke off of, but there was a split in 1960, I believe, in the town of or city of Aberdeen, and so we call it Aberdeen. They found like the leader at that time in bed with another person's wife, and this is the whole story, is that they say, oh no, she was just in there washing his feet and blah 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 blah. So
putting perfume on him.
right. And so there was this huge split that happened, and Aberdeen broke off. Sometimes they broke off into other little sects too, but they're hanging by a thread right now. They are. I'm very much pleased to admit they're hanging by a thread. Yeah. And the thing is we need the cult extracted out of it, right? That's what we need. Is they need to go through a transformation. They need to go through another Aberdeen.
Yeah, to awaken to, I mean, really and truly, when I made that list at the very beginning of all of the abuse that's involved, it just didn't, around you, whether it was directly you or around you, it's so sick that you almost would have to have some sort of complete whitewash or something to clean it up. The body of Christ to me is so much more powerful when it has a mission, and so I look forward to checking in with you and finding out where this goes, because I know you're going to have people come around and support and to help you. And I mean, just like this hat I'm wearing, you can't probably see it, but it says Bochis, and that's the safe house that I, really promote and help. And she was you 7 years ago going, how do I fix this? Now, she hadn't been hurt like you have, and your mission might be a little different. But let me tell you, 7 years down the line, you're going to have some really beautiful victories at your feet.
And we're in the middle of setting up a charity, right? To help not only those that have left years ago that have never done therapy, but we have some extreme cases inside right now that are needing help. That takes time to do. We're setting up a GoFundMe in the next couple of days just to help support us getting our website up and going, getting this charity up and going. I didn't realize how expensive these things were. So that will be up and going in the next couple of days. I think the last thing that I just want to mention here that I always do an appeal out to people is that there was a Down syndrome boy that was a part of my story that was very close to me in a lot of the horrific abuse.
No.
And you never know. Maple Creek was a very small town. You never know somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody. I always look for this Down syndrome boy. He was about 5 years older than me at the time. So that would put him in his 50s now. He had like very gingery, strawberry blonde hair. I always put that out there whenever I can. One day I have this hope of finding him.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Hopefully he's still with us, and
yeah, exactly. And he might not be. It's just one of those things that he could have been from a Hutterite colony. I don't know. My gut
what
always
did you
tells
just
me.
say? I don't know that word. Heterite?
Okay, so
Like we need to chat just a little bit longer if you can stay.
yes. Oh yeah, I'm totally good. So
Okay.
you guys don't have Hutterites in the States?
Maybe I've never heard of it. Maybe we do.
Okay, so there's Hutterite colonies. So Hutterites they live in their own colonies,
Okay.
and they they all wear pretty much matching clothes.
Oh, we
And
have
then,
like Mennonites. So it's very similar.
much like Mennonites, the same kind of thing. But around Maple Creek, there was all these Hutterite colonies. One of the first places I was taken to was a mobile home that had Hutterites in it. And yeah, they all gave Ellen money for what they got to do that day. Anyhow, I've always been trying to pinpoint where this Down syndrome boy came to. And I just, part of me is just,
was he abused with you? Or?
oh, horribly. Yeah. So I talk about what I don't talk about in the Quonset,
Right.
with that other group of people. He is literally the first thing I saw when I walked into this Quonset. And he was strapped to this circular wooden thing, naked, wearing this like open white gown kind of shirt thing. Yeah. And then he was with me at one of my houses that how I describe it. It was a house that I went down this really long, bumpy road, and it was a house that had this high deck. And he was at that house too.
Also.
So yeah, he was the one person that was with me that I wasn't with the other children, right? We were in these intimate kind of
just you two and these creepy people.
and these other people. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, so do you know what his name was then, or he just?
I don't, but like when you sit, like when I sit with it and I'm like, gosh, what was your name? I think that it's one of those things when I'm just not thinking. I'm like, I wonder how Tommy's doing. That's what comes to my head, right? Where I'm like, oh, maybe his name was Tommy, but that's what comes to my head when I'm just like biking or I'm doing something and I wander to him and I'm like, I wonder how Tommy's doing. And maybe that's just something that I called him, right? I don't know. Yeah, he went through horrible abuse too. Yeah, was drugged. And
Well, I hope you find him. And if anybody knows anything, it would probably be up in the Maple Creek, Canada area, which is what, like north of North Dakota or Montana, or where?
Yeah.
Montana?
I'm really bad with geography. Yeah.
Me too. I'm like, oh.
Yes, north of Montana. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So and Maple Creek was just not far from the Alberta border. Regina was 4 hours the other way, and Medicine Hat. So yeah, and it's just one of those things that I just put out there. You never know, right? You just never know. And I mean that I've had Hutterites reach out to people that I know. I've had the bishop of the Hutterite colonies reach out to me, with saying that that they deal with this kind of stuff. Nothing gets shoved underneath the rug, and it's I call bullshit.
Yeah.
But so I haven't responded again to that letter. I just told him, I said, if you're really going to investigate this, and you just need to find out who knew Ellen Drever, and then you're going to find the people. But I mean, how could somebody keep track of 12, 13 people showing up in a mobile home with a little girl and Ellen Drever? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
creepy. So creepy.
Yeah.
I can't relate. I mean, I really do think there's some sort of demonic something involved there, because it just makes no sense.
Right?
Why would anybody want to mess with a little girl and a Down syndrome boy? And what adults do, it's their business. But I mean, And then
Ellen,
you were basically trafficked, but
very
traffic
much so.
your own, you weren't like taken across areas, or you were just centrally located.
Yeah, centrally. Yes, yeah. Like when I left, when I finished my last of my police statement, so I did 4 hours one day and 5 hours the next day. And when she left, she told me that the charges that were being investigated was sex trafficking, torture, and child sex abuse.
Well, and so had they heard anything? Were you like the first person to show up on the door, or are they
I
allowed to
don't
tell
know
you?
because I don't think they're allowed to say. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I know that Ellen, I was not Ellen's first. I 100% know that I was not Ellen's first. Yeah, he's, and you talk to anybody who's had altercations with them, and when people are telling you the story, it's so eerily accurate in the sense that he just owns you, right? There was like the sickness within that ownership of just bold. He's just bold. I mean, he's just
That's a
bold.
true, like narcissistic, like
Yeah.
controlling, domineering spirit. A lot of people call it Jezebel, and it's a very accurate name.
Mhm.
And it definitely seems as though he really weaved you into his web deep.
Very
Um,
deep.
and
Yeah.
and that's the thing that's so tough, is when your own parents um, can't have the leg strength to stand. That's when they know they're winning. They've got all the leverage because they're able to
You're
hold.
able to have your parents, and then that was the thing. So
Think about how powerful that is.
yeah, our family was, you couldn't get any lower than our family in that church. We were the bottom of the bottom of the barrel, right? And so you think of that, you make this family the bottom of the bottom of the barrel, and then you have access to this child, right? And nothing can be done, right? I just am taken wherever I want. And the thing is people like, well, did other people in the brethren know? Yeah, they did. I had an altercation one time with Ellen in where he was really, really hurting me. And his wife got scared. And she actually called up Morse Hope, and he came over. Ellen didn't even leave the room with me. He stayed in the room, continuing doing what he's doing until there was a huge loud crash and a bang out in the other part of the house. And that's when he got up and left.
What
Had
was
that,
saying? What happened?
I don't know. There was a huge fight. So there was a
Oh,
huge fight between Morse and like Ellen's wife, Edna, right? There was a huge fight that had happened.
it's also sickening. It's like a soap opera that's like gone twisty and dark. Like it's just
And it
nuts.
just, it gave me confirmation of why Morse wanted me out so bad when I became kind of age, right?
Yeah.
And so after I was going to start this story before, but when I left Maple Creek and we went to Medicine Hat, I met my husband there. And got pregnant. And then that's when I was withdrawn from, as soon as they found out I was pregnant. And once I had gotten into Medicine Hat, I mean, they followed me around. They could keep their eye on me pretty good in Maple Creek, but in Medicine Hat was just constant stalking. They stayed outside our fourplex. They just didn't leave. They didn't leave us alone until one day, my husband, I think it was in Zellers or Kmart or something like that, went up and tapped on Morse Hope's shoulder and said, I want to let you know the devil's watching you, because they called my husband the devil, right? And we actually left. We left Medicine Hat and came to Red Deer because we just couldn't do it anymore. And at that point, I was like, there was no way I was going to raise a child
No.
in this environment. There was no way
It's
whatsoever.
like being stalked all the time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, what the other thing that I forgot to ask, and I was curious, so when you lost everything on your computer, was it detrimental to your case?
No,
Oh,
it wasn't.
good.
No,
Oh,
no,
good.
no, it wasn't. I was, the only thing is that I knew it was going to happen. Like it happened to Richard. It happens to pretty much anybody who's a whistleblower, right? I
Right.
knew it was going to happen. I just thought I had more time, and I should have known that if Carmen came forward, like that I knew that shook their foundation when Carmen came forward. And it was the next morning. I was like, I thought, and I mean, it wasn't a really old computer. It wasn't, you know what I mean? And then as soon as I heard that Carmen had had a disconnection of service.
You're like,
And
ooh,
she's
that
like,
might happen to me.
yeah. And so I was like, no, we know who was behind it and whatever. It's
When is it fun for you? Is there ever a time where you're like, yes, like when you get one of the crumbs, is it somebody like Carmen coming across? Like what
yeah,
is
Carmen 100% is my fun piece.
yeah.
It's why I told her I was not doing the podcast without her, because without her, they just look at us as opposers and we're these people that are just causing absolute false accusations. But you put Carmen into the picture, and now all of a sudden, here's someone who hasn't been abused.
Oops, it's the bloodline.
It's the bloodline, and she's supporting us, right?
Yeah.
So it's
And so is her husband?
yes, he's just in the background, but Carmen is very much a female powered duo between her and I, very much so. Yeah, it's
Good. I love it. I would love for you to come back
I
again.
totally will. Yeah,
There's so many things that, like I was writing down earlier, like we could go into so much about laws. We could go into so much about the church. And so today I just was like, let's just get kind of a
let's
nice
scratch the
round out.
surface.
Yeah, let everybody get to know you. Get them following your channel. What's your Twitter handle? Could you say that for everybody? If you want to follow you on Twitter?
It's Cheryl'L_Hope, I think.
I think it is too.
Yeah.
Okay. And then are you on any other social media?
So well, if you want the deep part of me that expresses herself through poetry, I have an Instagram page called Cheryl's Hope in Hell. That's how I heal. I heal a lot of the parts of me through poetry.
I love it. Cheryl's Hope in Hell.
Yeah. And I mean, because I tell you,
That's Instagram.
That's Instagram. So when you leave, every Sunday they preach to you that if you leave, the world will eat you, chew you, and spit you out. Pretty much, you don't have a hope in hell. So when I started collecting all of my poetry and I got back into therapy again, I was like, it was my therapist like, you really need to do something with this. And then that name came to me, Cheryl's Hope in Hell. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's quite the dichotomy. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, since you're married to the so-called devil,
Yeah.
isn't it so interesting how it is a complete inside out and upside down to what they were expressing from the highest levels. Like I said, there might be really amazing Plymouth Brethren people out there because I really do like to say that because I know that every family has a different position in the church. Everybody's whatever, but be careful out there in the spiritual wild, as I say.
Yeah, very much so, because it's not always what
So
you think
that's
you're
awesome.
getting.
So are you anywhere else? Are you on Facebook or Telegram?
Instagram, no, and then just YouTube with our
What's your new one?
our new podcast. Let's just
And
be
it's
patient with
Get
this.
a Life Ex-Cult Conversations.
Yeah, Get a Life Ex-Cult Conversations. Yeah, we're learning, right? It's
a process.
It is a process learning. We just did another one, recorded another one. That was probably our best one. We got Carmen to come out with her story and her letter that she had written and really dove into that. Got to show the pictures of what they do with you when you leave. So in all the photo albums, you're like removed. So they don't even show the underneath the picture that you even were a child of theirs. Richard Marsh used to stay at my sister's house all the time in Maple Creek. And when I first contacted him, he had no clue I existed. He didn't know they had 6 kids.
Wow, they erased you.
It's an assembly death.
You gotta get through, and that would be societal or community abuse. I mean, there's a long list of abuse with you. Also, before I go, I saw that somebody had asked again why I have a survivor on, and I had said that I wouldn't have another survivor on. I asked Cheryl 4 to 6 months ago. And
back in January, February, maybe, yeah.
I told her I would still honor the fact that I had told her she could come on, and she's welcome to come back on and finish her story. But I'm not out actively looking for new stories. So I just want to make that clear because I saw somebody else asked about that again.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it, Carmen.
It's completely my pleasure, and I feel so blessed to have been connected to you through our
Me
mutual friend.
too.
And
Yes, me
I love
too.
our mutual friend, and so
Right? Yeah.
I knew that you would be a good and beautiful soul, and I knew that your story would be true because I know her so well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I hope you have a beautiful day, and everyone, thank you
You.
for coming, and please support her. Again, it's called Get a Life, X Cult Conversations on YouTube. She's Cheryl L underscore Hope on Twitter, and then Cheryl's Hope in Hell for her amazing poetry on, her therapy and healing journey,
It
which is
was. It's totally, that's what I said. I mean, you have to understand my poetry is the way you get inside the dark and let the heart describe the words that cannot be construed together in a normal human brain. It's poetry is my way. It's yeah, even at 16, it was my way of telling my mom and dad that I was leaving. Yeah.
well, thank you for staying.
Thank you so much too. And we'll keep in touch.
Okay, sounds great.
Okay.
Goodbye, everybody. Have a great day and be careful out there in the spiritual wild.